2-1 in the end, the final score. Emma Byrne is with us at 7:30. On the GAA front, Congress rejected Plan B on Saturday. We'll try and figure out if there was one overarching reason as to why and what chance of something getting through in February 22. Colm Keys of the Irish Independent and Longford player Mickey Quinn with us just after 8 o'clock. And naturally enough, the fallout continues around Old Trafford. Pat Nevin and Andy Mitten on the football show from 9. 53106 is the text number. We are at Off the Ball on Twitter. Adrian Barry, hello to you.
Evening, Joe.
And Richie McCormack, hello to you.
Young Joe, how are you?
Gents, you're very welcome. I was reading in a couple of the papers that Alex Ferguson had turned up at Carrington this morning in a show of support, Adrian, to Ole Gunnar Solksjaer. But speaking to Andy Mitten, it turns out Ferguson was scheduled to be there anyway, regardless of the result at the weekend. So don't read too much into that, although it does seem he is advocating for Solskjaer to get some time. We don't know how much. Spurs on Saturday, Atalanta in the Champions League, and then Man City at Old Trafford in a lunchtime Saturday kickoff before the international break. And then I would presume there'll be a drawing of breath. So that is where we are. It was extraordinary on Sunday.
It was extraordinary on Sunday. What a game to be making your commentating debut on, Joe. If you'll allow me to open proceedings with that one.
You're allowed.
Have you anything to say on the matter?
I've nothing to say on the matter. It was enjoyable. Brian Kerr, very able co-commentator, so he dragged me through. But I think we should move on, Adrian. I think the less said, the better. The less said, the better.
I did hear the first 5 minutes or so. I won't lie to you. I was rushing back to get to see the game, but I did listen to the first 5 minutes. And if that was anything to go by, Joe, it wasn't as if anything happened after that. It was a mad game. It was a mad game, wasn't it? Like, and it became so enthralling for the wrong reasons. If you're a Man United fan, after about 3-0 down, it became like a box office match where you were like, it was absolutely, you couldn't miss a minute of it because you just knew that people were going to remember this game for years to come. And actually, one thing that hasn't been spoken about that much, which I noticed after the game, where Solskjaer's been interviewed, and the interviewer said to him, what point did you I can't remember the words that he used. Was it, what point did you realise that it was a management of the scoreline situation?
Damage limitation, I would think.
Damage limitation was the words that was used, Joe. Exactly. And I expected Solskjaer to do listen, we're Manchester United. That is never damage limitation. No matter what the scoreline, we always expect ourselves to get back into it. And like, I understood that the fourth goal just before half-time, everybody knew it was a hammer blow. But I didn't really think that the manager was going to be going into the dressing room going, well, sure, that's it, lads. It's done. Of all the clubs in the world for that to be happening, I would have thought that was as big a reason as any for concern if you're a Manchester United fan, or indeed one of the people making the decisions there, because I would have thought it's beholden on the manager, no matter what's going on, to be in the dressing room at half-time going, we are Manchester United. Like, obviously, let's try and fix things that are happening out there, but you never give up. And it was kind of interesting that was the language that he used. So, but yeah, for me, it became such box office 3-4-0. You couldn't miss a second of the second half, even though it was obviously, the game was long since done.
It was just amazing how bad they were, Richie. I mean, you can't really over exaggerate that point. And the first goal, I think every pundit on television has really enjoyed tearing apart the frailties of the Manchester United press. Never has a pressing action been more analysed, and it was just an assassination, minute by minute by minute, and they were powerless to do anything about it. I see in the Guardian, Jamie Jackson here writing in the Guardian, and this was inevitable. This is now what happens. The agents speak to the media, and the save your own skin game begins. So, for instance, several dressing room sources have told the Guardian that the capitulation to Liverpool at Old Trafford has crystallised a lack of belief in Solskjaer being a good enough manager for United in the dressing room. The 48-year-old's considered tactically underwhelming, whilst being well liked by the squad and within the wider club, and that's been replicated in various publications. So already in the last 48 hours, the leaking has begun.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a very poorly run organisation from the top down, and like, I hate coming back to it constantly, but I think the Ronaldo transfer speaks volumes of where that club is at, because it would be difficult to think of another club of that stature at this moment in time that would allow former players who aren't employed by the club to essentially set up a deal to re-sign a 36-year-old who is a goal scorer but limited in what they do, so much so that they will alter your entire style of play, and let that go through purely as a vanity signing because there were whispers that your opposition were interested in him. Like that is kind of the problem with Manchester United, like as a whole. Like, you look at their the punditry around it, I guess, on Sunday afterwards, and Gary Neville twisting himself in knots to not criticise Solskjaer. There's been this talk since about not calling for managers' heads and why aren't certain pundits saying he has to go. And I'm trying to think, like, outside of the bluster of Dunphy and Co. a few years ago, like, that kind of stuff didn't really exist in the English media, outwardly saying that a manager has to go and has to go now. There's been questions over how they set up teams and how they, how fit are they to manage, but not a call that they should walk or they should be sacked. But to not criticise or not critique objectively a person, whether it's a manager or a player or whatever, their performance, when that's your job and you're literally beholden to subscription fee players to do that, just seems odd. And I don't know, like the situation around Solskjaer, just from minute one, him getting the job, the insistence from former club people that he get the job, and now that he be given more time based on, it seems, like you mentioned there, Andy Mitten saying it isn't the case, but that Alex Ferguson has gone to bat for him somewhat in these last few days. I don't know how you can think that Solskjaer has any kind of standing in that dressing room at all.
To be fair, I think Ferguson has spoken up for him behind the scenes. It's just people were interpreting the visit to Carrington today as a show of support, whereas that was going to happen anyway. But I do think Ferguson has spoken up for Solskjaer behind the scenes. Ultimately, the decision rests with Joe Glazier, who's still out in Florida. Like, Adrian, the bottom line here is it's done, really, isn't it? Like, it's just very hard to imagine a way back unless they pretty much instantly go on a winning spree. And this club has been really struggling on various fronts. Last-minute goals to win against Villarreal and Atalanta. And then on the Premier League front, you kind of forget how bad it's been. Like, conceding 4 at Leicester, but they haven't won a game in the Premier League in over a month. So it seems very unlikely they're suddenly going to go on this winning spree. And Spurs away, you would think that's winnable. Man City could be ugly. International break. I mean, I don't know. It's just very hard to imagine this not being the end for him in the next 4 to 5 weeks, one way or another.
I absolutely agree that it's done. It has to be done. I'm sure that they're the conversations that are happening behind the scenes now, that, like, in some ways, criticising Solskjaer at this stage nearly feels like a pile-on to the point of it being too easy, and it's all inevitable anyway. And look at you named some of the fixtures there, Joe. We've seen United, not to mind from game to game, but within games being so, what's the word, stop-start at a very minimum, and like looking from being one of the best teams in the world to capitulating minutes later. And so, like, who knows in some of those games? Like, geez, I mean, I know a lot of the conversation that into Liverpool was, and maybe they were very optimistic in hindsight from a Manchester United point of view, that, like, United are so mad that maybe they could just go out and actually nick this one. And certainly the conversation was, like, that's a possibility, but if one team is to kill the other team, it's going to be Liverpool. Yeah. But you just don't know with them. But it does feel as if it's done. It feels like it's been 3 years that I think a lot of the positive PR around Solskjaer has been that way because of what went before. It looked good when you watch the Mourinho football. I'm not talking, like, they obviously finished, was it second under him, whatever it was, good finish, but the football wasn't pretty. I was at some of the games when Van Gaal was there, not pretty. Like, so he got a lot of positive PR out of that. He'll do his reputation as a manager has gone up now. You know what I mean? Like, he's suddenly gone from he's going to manage United to, like, he'll be, I presume, a target now for a mid to lower end Premier League club, which it's not meant as any sort of a sideswipe, but that is probably where his natural fit probably sits.
Geez, I'm not sure Solskjaer would get a Premier League job now.
No, I can't see it happening. Like, if it didn't happen in the immediate aftermath of Cardiff, etc., I don't see why it would happen now, especially now. And, like,
I think because yeah, go on.
Two things. his wages are certainly his what he'd ask for as a former Manchester United manager would be vastly increased upon what he would be as a former Molde and Cardiff manager. So that would rule him out of a certain swathe of Premier League clubs. And then beyond, like below that, like I mentioned this in the show before, like yo-yo teams in inverted commas have gotten a little bit more canny about who they're hiring and where they're hiring from. Like look at Brentford bringing in Thomas Frank in the last few years. I know he's having a rotten season now, but Daniel Farke at Norwich. There've been others in terms of, you know, approach from the upper tier of the Championship to the bottom tier of the Premier League. I struggle to see where he'd fit in and who'd be happy, who'd be buoyed by Solskjaer's appointment. Like what Premier League club in the next 6 months gets rid of their manager? Like for instance, I have Southampton starting 11 in front of me now. Like if Ralph Hasenhüttl goes in a roll of 6-7 games without a win and he finds himself on the scrap heap come January, they bring in Solskjaer. Are Southampton fans happy? I don't think they are. And I think it's struggled to find a lot of Premier League fans who would be delighted to watch him walk in the door, given the hames of things he's made with a fairly expensive squad over the last 12 months.
Yeah, look, totally. And I would go with a lot of that, Richie, I have to say, right? But I do think that there are a lot of reasons to think that Solskjaer will get a job at that level again. Like, will it be in the Premier League? I wouldn't be hugely surprised if he was to get something back. Like, he's sitting in that interview replaying that Roy Keane clip from, I can't remember exactly, was it just after Solskjaer came in where Keane was it on Sky, and he was talking about this bunch of players are not going to fight for any manager. Wait and see the next manager that goes under. And like, there is a bit of that. Like, I think, lads, you do have to ask, you have to say, look, at critical thinking, you have to say Solskjaer's not getting the best out of that group. They're better than what we saw as a group. They are than what we saw at the weekend. But you also have to flip that and say that they're not fighting like they should. You have to ask, what's wrong with the culture of that group? Are there certain personalities or egos within that group that are dragging them down? You have to ask bigger questions about the club. I think, like Richie, you mentioned about the Ronaldo signing, I would probably understand that more than I'd understand bringing in Donny van de Beek, and he's played 140 minutes this season. Makes no sense to me at all. So I'm just saying that if I'm Solskjaer and I'm sitting down with, look at Brentford, whatever you're having yourself, I'm going to make those points. And I think that, there's that. And I also think that there's plenty of owners out there still who'll happily take the cast-offs of Manchester United.
I'll get to some of your texts in a moment. We should start the news round. It is, as ever, thanks to Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razor. So let's get you up to speed on everything going on. And Richie, people may have been at work and missed the game, but this is a huge step forward to certainly World Cup qualification playoff for the Republic of Ireland.
Certainly is, yeah. The Republic of Ireland have collected their first points of their World Cup qualifying campaign. Goals from Megan Connolly, a brilliant free kick from her, and a scrappy one from Denise O'Sullivan in the second half gave Vera Pauw's side a 2-1 win away to Finland. The Finns, for context, hadn't lost a qualifying game of any hue in 3 years until this evening. Next up for Vera Pauw's side are back-to-back home games with Slovakia and Georgia next month. Georgia, for their part, beaten 2-0 by Slovakia earlier today. And sticking on the international front, the women's under-19s beat Northern Ireland today by 2-0 to round off their unsuccessful European qualifying campaign. And the Aviva Stadium is going to be sold out for an Ireland international for the first time in 2 years. 50,000 tickets for next month's World Cup qualifier with Portugal were snapped up within minutes this morning of going on sale.
Emma Byrne is going to join us this hour. The first 10-15 minutes for Ireland, very, very bright in Helsinki, and the Megan Connolly free kick. Initially, I had thought it was a goalkeeping error, but then it turned out it was off the underside of the crossbar and then off the goalkeeper. So it was a brilliant free kick. And then realistically, I think you'd have to say the Finns were the better team, passed the ball better, created more chances, had a number of set pieces, corners and free kicks which almost found Finnish heads and made their way in towards the Irish goal. And then eventually when Finland scored an equaliser about 8-9 minutes into the second half, you thought, well, this could be real trouble for Ireland now. And in fairness, they suddenly flicked a switch and had a good couple of minutes, and Lucy Quinn did brilliantly for the Denise O'Sullivan goal. O'Sullivan finished with a header. Their goalkeeper made a mess of the cross, and then it was back to just hanging on a little bit for Ireland. But it's one of those games, Adrian, where performance is important-ish, but not really. The result here is everything. This is ultimately, this group, a race between Finland and Ireland to see who finishes behind Sweden. Finland are about 10 places above Ireland in the rankings, so to go to Helsinki and to win is just an incredible fill-up and start to the group for Ireland.
Yeah, I agree with that all day long. I think the performance was for Thursday night and the result was for tonight. And they got both, you'd have to say. And for sure. The momentum of sport can be funny. Definitely watching the game, particularly at the end, Joe. Geez, it was like watching it from behind the couch as Finland were piling on the pressure and Ireland were doing really well to hang on. But yeah, the goal, it came from the underside. But I'd like to see actually the trajectory of the ball. The Connolly goal it looked to me to be almost coming back out and hit the back of the keeper's hand almost and went back in.
Maybe, yeah.
It was a difficult one to and she made a Hames of the second one, obviously. But to be fair as well, you'd have to say that Denise O'Sullivan was really on her toes to get in and preempt that something was going to happen and get ahead on it. But I do think that Ireland have really, and looking at them, I was out there on Thursday night looking at them up close. They've the core of a really good technical team there. O'Sullivan, Louise Quinn and Lucy Quinn, McCabe, phenomenal again tonight. She's off the pitch for a couple of minutes getting a bit of treatment, and probably a big part of the reason that Finland scored. And I know that I even talked to Emma Byrne the other night before the match about the goalkeeping situation, and she was saying that at that point she favoured Grace Maloney, and she was saying that actually the management just need to put a bit of faith in her and put her in and give her some confidence. And then Brosnan comes out and I don't know, was she officially player of the match, but certainly had a case for it. Decent again tonight. So it's definitely building. I think the loss of the assistant manager is going to affect him a little, but I certainly think on the pitch there's a nice core of a team building there.
So some texts in. A lot of people have said Solskjaer did a good job stabilising things up to this point. What exactly has he stabilised? He's spent about 400 million since arriving and they can't play together. Other than salary, what has Ole himself gotten out of the last few years? Constant criticism and his name's in tatters. Kind of sad, says Peter. Highest wage bill in the Premier League and they can't defend, says Patrick. It is extraordinary. They have one clean sheet now in 21 games, Manchester United, which is so bad. I mean, I think Liverpool are best in class with about 9 clean sheets now in 21 games. Chelsea and Man City both around 8 each. To use a phrase from the 90s, that match was a video nasty, indefensible, the death knell of the Ole era in many ways. If he'd left a year ago, it would have been better for all concerned in terms of reputations, etc., says Connor. Yeah, I mean, I think towards the end of last year, it wasn't like there was unanimity. It was unanimous that Solskjaer was the man to take things forward, or he had done a spectacular job. But I think there was a sense they'd finished second, they were improving. If they'd won the Europa League final, then his reputation over the summer would have been not bad at all. I mean, where it is now, like we said, I think a Premier League job offer is unlikely to come his way when this thing eventually wraps up pretty soon. Rio Ferdinand has spoken, Richie, so you said, I'm in.
Yeah, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he looks set to remain in the Manchester United dugout for at least this weekend's Premier League trip to Tottenham. That follows, of course, that 5-0 humiliating defeat to Liverpool at Old Trafford, their 5th defeat in 9 matches. And speaking on his brilliantly named Vibe with 5 podcast, the former United defender Rio Ferdinand says questions need to be asked now of the manager.
You can run and you can huff and puff as much as you want. If there's no purpose, if there's no tactical element behind it, then it ain't going to work. It don't matter who you are. It don't matter how fast you are, how strong you are, how quick you are, how aggressive you are. If you haven't got it from a tactical standpoint nailed down first, you're going to get picked off. And I think that's what happened. It was an embarrassment. We've been there. I've been in performances. We got beat 6-1 at home by Man City. Embarrassing. But we had an identity to fall back on in the coming weeks. This is the problem for this team. They're struggling to find an identity. They're struggling to find who they are. Do they know who they are? Do they know what they are? And so the question is the manager giving the players the right information? That's one question. And if so, are the players not taking on the information? That's what the manager needs to get to the bottom of. That's what the club needs to get to the bottom of. Because at the moment, they look like a team of individuals just thrown together. They look like a team that you look at them and think, are they coached properly? Are they taking in the information?
Well, that's the damning thing. They don't look coached. I mean, they don't look coherent. They don't look like they know what they're trying to do out of possession in particular, and to an extent in possession. I mean, what they're trying to do really is let's just get things going because we're all very talented. And to be fair, when they're in the mood, like against Atalanta in the second half, they are very threatening because they have a lot of good players. But out of possession, and Ronaldo has really complicated this picture. And where I do have sympathy for Solskjaer is that this Ronaldo problem, and it is a problem when they don't have the ball, which is a large part of the game. This Ronaldo problem was foisted upon him, and you have to play Ronaldo for political reasons. And there's no easy answer there. It's really, really tricky. You can't be a pressing team, and yet there's obviously some desire there to be a pressing team, and we saw glimpses of that on Sunday and how quickly it fell asunder. So you can't be a pressing team. They need to drop deep. They don't want to be this counter-attacking team forever, especially when they're at home, because there's a crowd there now and there's a real sense of, hang on, we're not just going to be a counter-attacking team, we're Manchester United. So they're caught between two stools. They don't know what they're trying to do. And you can throw that and say, well, that's because Solskjaer doesn't have a clue. And there might be, grain of truth in that. But I also think it's because it's very hard to work out what you do with the players he has on the pitch, Adrian, when there's Ronaldo there, when there's Bruno there, when there's, even Rashford lately is just not pressing and not running the way he should be. And that's not to mention Pogba, who wasn't even starting on Sunday. And I don't know how you fix that. I don't know if Conte came in, for instance. I don't think that works, because Conte looks at Ronaldo and says, no, absolutely no chance. And do you bring in Conte knowing he's going to start World War III with Ronaldo? I don't know.
Well, I think no matter who comes in, I think as part of that interview process, it's like, so we've made this signing. What are your thoughts on that? I'm sure that's an aspect of it, and be interesting how that plays out. Like the Rashford one, you'd give him a bit of slack. Like he's just coming back from injury. He has scored a couple of goals. Fair enough. Maybe a little bit of the sharpness isn't there. Is the Ronaldo thing having an impact on Fernandes? Like you looked at the Ronaldo performance of the game against Ireland, where he was largely absent, and everybody's going, this guy's useless, he's a busted flush, and then suddenly he does what he does. That's why I, to a degree, understand the Ronaldo signing, particularly maybe for a manager like Solskjaer, who has looked out of his depth for a while, that he is the sort of player who can be the band-aid, who can definitely pull you out of games that you don't deserve to get anything out. So there's a little bit of that, and I don't know, are the club executives deciding that as they're signing Ronaldo? Probably not. You'd like to hope not, because that would be quite backward thinking. But it isn't a problem that's going anywhere anytime soon, no matter who comes in. Like, he's not going to be hanging around at the bench either way. If that's the suggestion, that Conte comes in and he decides, you're not part of my plan, you're going on the bench, that is absolutely going to be World War III. That is, I don't know which way that ends.
He's also very much like 3-5-2, always has been, always will be, you would think. So where Bruno fits into that, I don't really know either. And by the way, I think that's a really good point in Ronaldo. He's still doing great things. He still scores the winner against Villarreal. He still has that header against Atalanta. He's in that weird, this isn't black or white, he's in that weird grey zone now where the end is nigh, but there's still flashes of brilliance. And so it's not like it's a clear cut, well, he's just not able to do it anymore, because at times he kind of is, and yet you're sacrificing a lot to still have him in the team. And that's that horrible dilemma now that, that's going to be Ronaldo's career for the next 2 to 3 years. And any manager who has him is going to have that dilemma. Caoimhín Kelleher.
Yeah, he looks set to miss Liverpool's Carabao Cup tie away to Preston tomorrow night. The Republic of Ireland goalkeeper dealing with an illness. Meanwhile, James Milner looks set to be out for several weeks after sustaining a hamstring injury at Old Trafford on Sunday. In better news for Liverpool, Naby Keita's injury doesn't appear to be as bad as first feared, while Thiago Alcantara is also coming back to full fitness. He won't be involved, though, at Deepdale tomorrow night either. There are 3 quarter-final places up for grabs in that Carabao Cup tonight. Arsenal are at home to Leeds. Premier League leaders Chelsea play host to Southampton. Shane Long and Will Smallbone on the bench for the Saints tonight. And QPR are taking on Sunderland at Loftus Road. Penalty hero in the previous round against Everton, Jimmy Dunn, is only on the Rangers bench for that one tonight.
Johnny Sexton?
Yeah, he says he'll be fully fit for Ireland's first autumn international with Japan. The 36-year-old has been nursing a hip injury sustained while on duty with Leinster in recent weeks. Ireland welcomed Japan to the Aviva Stadium on Saturday week before games with the All Blacks and Argentina. While sticking with rugby, the Women's Six Nations is to retain its own window. This year's competition played in April, starting a week after the men's tournament came to a close. Six Nations Chief Executive Ben Burrell said today the men's and women's tournaments will be kept separate going forward, with the latter returning to its original format from next year.
I think that makes sense, Adrian, to keep them separate.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed that last year, Joe. That it didn't get swallowed up by the men's tournament, I think was a huge thing. It makes total sense to me they continue to do that and build. It needs to be built.
Yeah, better time of the year for better rugby as well. So it's win-win that April for the women, and so it will return to its original format next year. Yeah, so the COVID shortened version is no more, Richie.
Yeah, that thing of 2 separate groups, 2 matches in a final, and it is gone. It's back to the regular 5 matches for everybody. So, yep, it's going to be an interesting one next year, next April.
Very good. We'll be chatting to Pat Nevin, obviously, about events at Old Trafford later on, but also Walter Smith, who he's known since he was 12 years of age. Walter Smith came over to him and showed him how to kick the ball properly. So he's known Walter Smith a very long time. Passed away today.
Yeah, an incredible career, especially as a coach to Walter Smith, a player before that, but he's passed away at the age of 73. During a distinguished coaching career, he guided Rangers to an incredible 10 Scottish titles across 2 separate spells. Under Jim McLean, he was part of the Dundee United coaching staff when they reached the semi-finals of the European Cup. He was Alex Ferguson's assistant with Scotland at the 1986 World Cup, a role he later reprised at Old Trafford, and Smith also spent 3.5 years at the helm at Everton. Anybody and everybody who has worked under him and with him in the past while, including the FAI CEO Jonathan Hill, paying tribute today.
Yeah, seems beloved. And Damien Duff, we should mention.
Yep, the former Republic of Ireland international is being touted as a potential successor to Ian Morris as Shelbourne manager. The club confirmed yesterday, pretty surprisingly, that Morris will leave his role at the end of this season. Shell's promoted as First Division champions, and Duff is currently the club's under-17s coach.
Very good. Duff are in the League of Ireland, Adrian. Just imagine the videos that he'd show them.
I want like anti-rover stuff. But they wouldn't really be anti-rover stuff. It'd just be normal rover stuff. I was wondering actually when you were talking to Keith Andrews a couple of weeks ago and his name came up, I did wonder like what's happened to this guy, because he seems so highly rated wherever he goes.
Well, it would be good to see him back. Fellas, we are out of time. Adrian, Barry, thank you.
Thanks, lads.
Richie McCormack, pleasure.
Nice on.
Cheers. And now it's competition time.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's Cash Machine.
Once again, no winner in today's cash machine. 4,996 euro 66 cents were up for grabs when we made the call at 3 o'clock. Nobody answers. It means that 4,996 euro 66 cents rolls over to tomorrow. We'll be adding to that total as well. Tune into News Talk Breakfast from 8 a.m. to find out how much is up for grabs tomorrow.
The Newsround on Off the Ball
with Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You're pretty smart, right? Clever, intelligent. You make smart choices.